choices.
I will not.
Welcome to A Cinema Films, the channel where we dive deep into the world of movies and bring you honest, insightful, and engaging reviews. Today, we're taking a closer look at one of the most iconic superheroes of all time, Superman. From his legendary origins to his unforgettable impact on cinema, we'll explore what makes the Man of Steel such a timeless symbol of hope and heroism. Stay tuned as we uncover the strengths, the storytelling, and the legacy of this classic superhero film. Superman, 2025, is an American superhero film based on the legendary DC Comics character and marks the first official entry in the newly established DC Universe, DCU. Written and directed by James Gunn, the film serves as a complete reboot of the Superman film franchise. David Corenswet takes on the mantle of Clark Kent, Superman, joined by a talented cast that includes Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane, Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor, Edie Gathegi, Anthony Carrigan, Nathan Fillion, and Isabella Merced. The story follows Superman as he faces the global repercussions of intervening in an international conflict masterminded by the ruthless billionaire Lex Luthor. With the public turning against him, Superman must navigate the complexities of being both a hero and a symbol, while relying on the support of Lois Lane and his fellow superhero allies to restore hope and win back trust. The film's journey to the big screen was long and transformative. Development originally began in 2014 as a potential sequel to Man of Steel, 2013, with Henry Cavill expected to reprise his role. However, after the troubled release of Justice League, 2017, the sequel stalled and was eventually shelved by 2020. James Gunn began conceptualizing a new vision for Superman in August 2022, shortly before he was appointed co-CEO of DC Studios alongside Peter Safran in October of the same year. Gunn's involvement was officially revealed in December, and the project was initially titled Superman: Legacy. By March 2023, Gunn confirmed he would also direct the film, and casting announcements soon followed, with Corenswet and Brosnahan securing the lead roles by June. Production officially began in early 2024 in Svalbard, Norway, before moving to Trilith Studios in Atlanta, Georgia, with additional filming in Georgia and Ohio. Influenced heavily by Grant Morrison and Frank Whiteley's acclaimed comic series All-Star Superman, 2005-2008, filming wrapped in July 2024. The film premiered at the TCL Chinese Theater on July 7, 2025, and was released theatrically in the United States on July 11 by Warner Bros. Pictures as the opening chapter of the DCU's first phase, Gods and Monsters. Superman proved to be both a critical and commercial success, grossing $615.7 million worldwide to become the 8th highest-grossing film of 2025. Critics praised the film for its heartfelt tone, vibrant style, and earnest storytelling, though some noted it felt slightly overstuffed with plot elements. Performances by David Corenswet, Rachel Brosnahan, and Nicholas Hoult received particular acclaim, cementing their place in the DCU moving forward. With its blend of classic heroism and modern cinematic flair, Superman set a bold new direction for the franchise, paving the way for its announced sequel, Man of Tomorrow, scheduled to release on July 9, 2027. The story begins with Clark Kent, also known as Superman, intervening in an escalating international conflict. When the nation of Boravia prepares to invade its peaceful neighbor Jorhanpur, Superman flies into action, halting their forces and issuing a stern warning to Boravia's president, Vasil Gurkos, to leave Jorhanpur unharmed. His interference, however, quickly escalates tensions and sparks global controversy. Soon after, Superman experiences something unprecedented, his very first defeat when he is overpowered in Metropolis by a mysterious metahuman warrior known as the Hammer of Boravia. Gravely injured, Superman is forced to retreat to his fortress of solitude in Antarctica with the aid of his loyal canine companion, Krypto. Pursuing him is Angela Spica, better known as the Engineer, a dangerous cybernetic operative working with billionaire Lex Luthor. Inside the fortress, Superman's robotic aides harness concentrated solar radiation to heal him. They also provide him comfort by replaying a fragmented message from his Kryptonian parents, Jor-El and Lara Loravan, who had sent him to Earth as a child before Krypton's destruction. Yet the recording is incomplete, leaving only half of their final words preserved. Determined to face his enemies again, Superman returns to Metropolis only to suffer another defeat at the hands of the Hammer. It is revealed that the so-called Boravian champion is actually Ultraman, a twisted Kryptonian clone created and manipulated by Lex Luthor. Seeking to strengthen his connection to the world he protects, Superman agrees to an interview with Lois Lane, his longtime partner and fellow journalist at the Daily Planet. But their discussion turns tense when Lois challenges him on the political and ethical implications of his intervention in Boravia. At the same time, Luthor unleashes chaos by releasing a massive kaiju-like creature onto Metropolis. While Superman fights to save civilians alongside the Justice Gang, a heroic team consisting of Green Lantern, Mr. Terrific, and Hawkgirl, Luthor, Ultraman, and the Engineer infiltrate the Fortress of Solitude. They subdue its defenses, capture Krypto, and uncover the damaged Kryptonian message. The Engineer repairs it, and when Luthor broadcasts the restored version to the world, Superman is shaken to his core. The second half of the message reveals that Jor-El and Lara intended for their son not only to survive but to dominate, urging him to conquer Earth and repopulate Krypton by taking many wives. This revelation turns public opinion against Superman, as fear and suspicion of his true intentions spread. Distraught and desperate, Superman confronts Luthor, demanding the return of Krypto. The confrontation only worsens public distrust, but Lois remains steadfast, reassuring Clark that she knows his true heart. In a moment of vulnerability, Superman confesses his love for her. Soon after, in an attempt to calm rising tensions, he surrenders himself to the U.S. government. Instead of guaranteeing fairness, the government delivers him into Luthor's custody, who imprisons him inside an artificial pocket universe. There, Superman meets Metamorpho, another metahuman captive, held under Luthor's control with his young son Joey used as leverage. Luthor cruelly forces Metamorpho to transform his own hand into kryptonite, robbing Superman of his powers. During brutal interrogation, Luthor murders Malik Ali, one of Superman's supporters, in front of him. This atrocity horrifies Metamorpho, who resolves to help Superman escape. Together, they free Joey and Krypto and fight their way out of the pocket universe. Meanwhile, Lois convinces Mr. Terrific to aid in the rescue mission, and with her help, Superman is reunited with his adoptive parents, Jonathan and Martha Kent. Broken by the Kryptonian message, Superman doubts himself, but Jonathan reminds him that his destiny is not written by Krypton. His choices and actions are what define him. While Superman regains his resolve, internal betrayal destabilizes Luthor's schemes. Eve Taskmaker, Luthor's partner, secretly provides Jimmy Olsen with evidence of Luthor's collusion with Boravia, revealing he has been aiding Gurkos in exchange for half of Jorhanpur's territory. When Luthor learns of her betrayal, he imprisons her and sets his endgame into motion, opening an unstable portal to the Pocket Universe. The dimensional rift splits Metropolis in half, threatening to consume the city entirely. Superman rallies his allies, sending Green Lantern, Hawkgirl, and Metamorpho to stop Aravia from invading Jorhanpur once more. In the ensuing battle, Hawkgirl slays President Gurkos, and Green Lantern offers Metamorpho a permanent place in the Justice Gang. Meanwhile, in Metropolis, Superman and Mr. Terrific face off against the Engineer and Ultraman. Superman defeats the Engineer, only to learn that Ultraman is a distorted clone of himself, engineered by Luthor as a weapon to discredit him. With Krypto's help, Superman battles Ultraman in a cataclysmic duel, ultimately hurling him into a black hole created beneath the rift. Mr. Terrific then stabilizes the portal, closing it before Metropolis is destroyed. Superman confronts Luthor, who reveals his true motivation: jealousy and resentment. Despite his brilliance, wealth, and power, Luthor despises that humanity worships an alien savior instead of him. He admits to orchestrating the Aravian conflict as a trap to frame Superman, all to prove that the world should never trust an outsider. Superman rejects Luthor's ideology, but the billionaire refuses to yield until Krypto subdues him. With Lois and Jimmy's reporting exposing his corruption and crimes, Luthor and his co-conspirators are arrested, and those imprisoned within the Pocket Universe, including Eve, are freed. Public faith in Superman is restored, and his love with Lois deepens as she confesses her feelings for Clark in return. The film closes on a quieter, more personal note. Superman recovers in the Fortress of Solitude, comforted by his robots, who show him cherished memories from his childhood in Kansas with Jonathan and Martha Kent, reminders of the family and humanity that truly shaped him. In a surprising final moment, his cousin Kara Zor-El arrives, tipsy and brash, to retrieve Krypto, setting the stage for future stories in the DC Universe. The cast of Superman, 2025, brings together a dynamic ensemble of established stars, rising talents, and surprising cameos to reintroduce the DC Universe's most iconic hero. David Corenswet headlines as Clark Kent, Superman, portraying the hero as both a survivor of Krypton and an earnest young journalist at the Daily Planet. James Gunn envisioned his Superman as roughly 25 years old, more experienced than Tom Welling's version in Smallville, but younger and less world-weary than Henry Cavill's Superman in the DCEU. Producer Peter Safran described Corenswet's interpretation as the embodiment of truth, justice, and the American way, as well as a kind-hearted figure in a cynical world. The film explores Clark's balance between being madly in love with Lois Lane, establishing friendships with other heroes, and confronting his own flaws. Corenswet distinguished between Clark's different personality, his intimate self with his parents, his professional demeanor at the Daily Planet, and the authoritative presence of Superman. He drew inspiration from Grant Morrison and Frank Whiteley's all-star Superman, Christopher Reeve's physicality, and even his own brother-in-law, a gentle giant whose quiet humility shaped Corenswet's portrayal of Clark's reserved charm. Gunn also revived a classic comic book detail: Clark's glasses subtly distort his appearance through a hypnotic effect, making his dual identity more believable. In addition to Superman, Corenswet also plays Ultraman, a corrupted clone engineered by Lex Luthor who masquerades as the Hammer of Aravia. Young Clark at age 2 is portrayed by Oliver Diego Silva. Rachel Brosnahan stars as Lois Lane, Clark's brilliant and sharp-witted colleague at the Daily Planet. Brosnahan described Lois as fiercely intelligent, feisty, and skeptical, particularly regarding Superman's interventions on the world stage. To modernize the character, she consulted with real journalists, shaping Lois into a tenacious and resourceful reporter who is both Clark's greatest challenger and eventual confidant. Nicholas Hoult transforms into Lex Luthor, Superman's calculating nemesis and the CEO of Luthor Corp. Hoult's Luthor is obsessive, relentless, and driven by envy of Superman's power and public adoration. Inspired by Michael Rosenbaum's Smallville portrayal and Steve Jobs' sleek aesthetic, Hoult embodied a visionary genius with a dangerous ego for authenticity. He even allowed his young son Joaquin to shave his head. Gunn based his interpretation partly on Brian Azzarello's Lex Luthor, Man of Steel, and the reckless scientific genius depictions from 1950s and 60s comics. The Justice Gang is introduced as Superman's heroic allies. Edie Gathegi plays Michael Hoult, Mr. Terrific, the gifted inventor whose search for meaning after personal tragedy drives his pursuit of justice. Anthony Carrigan portrays Rex Mason, Metamorpho, an archaeologist whose body can transmute into various elements, reflecting Carrigan's personal connection to themes of identity through his own experience with alopecia. Nathan Fillion appears as Guy Gardner, an abrasive Green Lantern with unshakable confidence and an infamous bowl-cut hairstyle that Fillion insisted on keeping. Isabella Merced joins as Kendra Saunders, Hawkgirl, a reincarnated alien warrior burdened by trauma yet softened by moments of humor. Her shorter stature adds an unexpected visual contrast to the team's lineup. Among Clark's human circle are Skylar Jacinto as Jimmy Olsen, the bright-eyed Daily Planet photographer, and Wendell Pierce as the irritable but driven editor Perry White, whose personal vendetta against Luthor fuels his motivations. Additional Daily Planet staff includes Beck Bennett as Steve Lombard, Michaela Hoover as Cat Grant, and Christopher McDonald as Ron Troop. Pruitt Taylor Vince and Neva Howell portray Jonathan and Marco Kent, grounding Clark with warmth and Midwestern authenticity, while Bradley Cooper and Angela Sarafine appear as Jor-El and Lara Lorvan, Superman's Kryptonian parents. Superman's fortress is inhabited by robotic aides, voiced by frequent Gunn collaborators, Alan Tudyk as 4, nicknamed Gary, Michael Rooker as 1, Palm Clemente Eve as 5, and Grace Chan as 12. Jennifer Holland, Gunn's wife, also voices a robot in an uncredited role. Krypto the Superdog was brought to life through a mix of visual effects and on-set work by dog actor Yolene, modeled after Gunn's own pet Ozu. The antagonists are fleshed out with Mara Gabriella Defar as Angela Spica, the engineer, a genetic-enhanced ally of Luthor, and Sarah Sampaio as Eve Taskmaker, Luthor's assistant whose divided loyalties create personal drama, especially in her secret relationship with Jimmy Olsen. Zlatko Buria plays President Vasil Gurkos of Moravia, while Terence Rosemore and Stephen Blackheart appear as Luthor Corp staffers Otis Berg and Sidney Happerson. Trevor Newland portrays Mr. Handsome, a humanoid creature Luthor created in childhood, showing the villain's twisted sentimentality. Michael Ian Black adds satire as Clevis Thornwaite, a right-wing talk show host smearing Superman, while James Hiroyuki Liao plays General Mori, the U.S. Secretary of Defense. The film also integrates familiar faces from across the DC universe. Frank Grillo reprises his role as Rick Flag Sr. from Creature Commandos, while Tynash KG's Bolden returns as Flo Crawley from the Suicide Squad. Cameos include Millie Alcock as Kara Zor-El, Supergirl, setting up her solo film, and John Cena as Peacemaker, appearing in a new segment mocking Superman ahead of his second season. Sean Gunn portrays Maxwell Lord, the corporate sponsor of the Justice Gang, in a fresh take distinct from previous versions. Michael Rosenbaum, famous for playing Lex Luthor in Smallville, lends his voice to one of Luthor's Raptor guards, while Will Reeve, son of Christopher Reeve, appears as a news reporter. Louisa Cross has a silent role as Sapphire Stagg, Metamorpho's wife. Together, this ensemble cast, ranging from iconic leads to playful cameos, creates a richly interconnected world, blending Superman's human relationships, Kryptonian legacy, and broader DCU mythology into a bold new beginning for the franchise. The production of Superman, 2025, began after James Gunn and Peter Safran took over as co-CEOs of DC Studios in late 2022. With Gunn setting out to write a new vision for the iconic hero. Originally announced under the title Superman, Legacy as part of the DC Universe's first chapter, the film was later simplified to just Superman. Pre-production brought together some of Gunn's frequent collaborators, including Beth Mickle as production designer, Judiana Mikovsky as costume designer, and Henry Brenham as cinematographer. Casting took shape in mid-2023, with David Corenswet chosen as Clark Kent, Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane, and Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor, while additional cast members such as Isabella Merced, Nathan Fillion, Anthony Carrigan, and Didi Gatherguy joined soon after. Filming officially began on February 29, 2024, with much of the shoot taking place at Trilith Studios in Atlanta, Georgia, alongside location work across Georgia and Ohio. Despite industry delays caused by the 2023 SAG-AFTRA strikes, the production stayed on course, and principal photography wrapped by late July 2024. Once filming concluded, the project moved into post-production, led by editors William Hoy and Craig Alpert, with visual effects overseen by Street 8 Tilde copyright Fane Serretti and handled by major companies including Framestore, ILM, and Wattier d'Iris FX. Pickup shots were later filmed in Atlanta and Los Angeles to refine certain scenes rather than reshoot large portions of the movie. With a reported production budget of around $225 million, Warner Brothers backed the film with a massive global marketing campaign leading up to its premiere at the TCL Chinese Theater on July 7, 2025. It was released shortly after in premium formats such as IMAX and 3D, reaching international audiences on July 9 before arriving in the United States on July 11. The film marked the beginning of the new DC Universe's cinematic journey under Gunn and Safran, positioning Superman once again at the center of superhero storytelling. The music of Superman, 2025, played a central role in shaping the emotional core and larger-than-life presence of the film. James Gunn revealed in December 2023 that much of the score and major thematic material had already been written, although the composer's name remained unannounced at that time because negotiations were still being finalized. In February 2024, Gunn officially confirmed that John Murphy, who had previously collaborated with him on The Suicide Squad, The Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special, 2022, and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, would be composing the score. Gunn explained that Murphy had a unique ability to blend grandeur with emotional resonance, making him the right choice to craft a fresh musical identity for Superman while honoring the character's legendary past. By the end of 2024, Gunn revealed that Murphy would also be reimagining and incorporating a new version of John Williams's iconic Superman march from Richard Donner's 1978 film. Gunn described Williams's original composition as one of the greatest film scores ever written and admitted that the melody had been tied to his personal vision of Superman from the very start of development. Rather than using it as simple nostalgia, Gunn wanted the new arrangement to act as a bridge between cinematic eras, allowing audiences to feel the weight of Superman's cinematic legacy while still introducing them to a modern interpretation within the DC universe. Murphy's approach involved blending Williams's heroic brass-driven motifs with his own darker, more textured orchestral layers, creating a soundscape that balanced optimism, vulnerability, and scale. Unlike many of Gunn's previous projects, which featured extensive playlists of licensed songs, Superman relied heavily on original scoring to maintain its tone of mythic heroism and sincerity. The film features only 2 licensed tracks, Punk Rocker by Teddy Bear's Iggy Pop, which underscores a chaotic, high-energy sequence, and 5 Years' Time by Noah and the Whale, which provides a more lighthearted and human moment in Clark Kent's personal life. This restrained use of external music allowed Murphy's score to dominate and give the film a more unified and timeless musical voice. In April 2025, it was revealed that composer David Fleming, known for his work on projects such as The Last of Us and Blue Planet 2, had joined the team to contribute additional music and share official credit with Murphy. Fleming's involvement brought added depth and versatility to the soundtrack, with the two composers weaving together themes that represented not only Superman's duality as Clark Kent and a hero but also the wide ensemble of characters within the story. The collaboration resulted in a score that moved seamlessly from intimate, heartfelt piano-led passages to sweeping orchestral and choral sequences designed to emphasize Superman's role as a universal symbol of hope. Adding to the uniqueness of the soundtrack, A special track titled The Mighty Crab Joy's theme was included. This song was performed by Foxy Shazam, with vocals by the band's frontman Eric Nally alongside Lulu Safran, daughter of producer Peter Safran. The piece was co-written by James Gunn and Nally, and though it had a more playful and unconventional style compared to the rest of the score, it reflected Gunn's tradition of including quirky, character-driven musical surprises within his films. The track's theatricality and rock-infused energy stood apart from the orchestral foundation of Murphy and Fleming's work, providing a moment of tonal variety while still aligning with the larger narrative spirit. The completed soundtrack became a carefully balanced blend of legacy and reinvention. It paid homage to Williams' timeless melodies while layering in fresh orchestral textures, modern arrangements, and a few offbeat musical flourishes that are now a signature of Gunn's filmmaking style. With its release, the score not only underscored the action and drama of Superman 2025, but also aimed to re-establish Superman's musical identity for a new generation, ensuring that his themes remain as enduring and iconic as the hero himself. Superman 2025 had a highly anticipated theatrical rollout that underscored its importance as the launch of James Gunn's new DC universe. The film premiered with a grand event at the TCL Chinese Theater on July 7, 2025, before being released worldwide by Warner Bros. Pictures. It opened in international markets on July 9 and reached audiences in both the United States and China on July 11. To maximize the cinematic experience, the movie was showcased in a variety of premium formats, including IMAX, RED 3D, Dolby Cinema, ScreenX, and 4DX, ensuring that audiences could immerse themselves in the spectacle through multiple viewing options. The film's release, however, was accompanied by legal controversy. In January 2025, the estate of Joe Shuster, co-creator of Superman, filed a lawsuit against Warner Bros. Discovery, claiming that distribution rights for certain international territories had reverted to them under varying copyright laws. The territories in question included the United Kingdom, Ireland, and Australia, where rights were said to have reverted in 2017, and Canada, where they allegedly reverted in 2021. Warner Bros. Discovery responded by filing a motion to dismiss, citing past rulings that had rejected similar claims. The initial lawsuit was dismissed in April due to lack of jurisdiction, but the Shuster estate refiled the case in the New York Supreme Court a month later, this time requesting an injunction. That motion was also denied in early June, allowing the film to proceed with its global release uninterrupted. Following its successful theatrical run, Superman quickly transitioned into the home entertainment market. The film became available for digital download on August 15, 2025, and later debuted on Warner Bros. Streaming platform HBO Max on September 19, following a 35-day digital window and a 70-day theatrical to streaming gap. Physical formats including Ultra HD Blu-ray, and DVD were released on September 23, featuring a variety of bonus content such as deleted scenes, a full-length making-of documentary, director's commentary by James Gunn, and several featurettes exploring the film's development, casting, and production. James Gunn explained that the decision to release Superman early on digital platforms was strategically tied to the second season of Peacemaker, 2025, which contains direct narrative connections to the film. The strategy proved successful, as the movie drew 13 million global viewers within its first 10 days on HBO Max, marking the highest numbers for that period on the service since Barbie in December 2023. Its arrival on streaming also reinvigorated interest in Superman's cinematic history, boosting viewership for classic entries like the 1978 Superman film, Superman Returns, 2006, Man of Steel, 2013, and even the acclaimed documentary Super/Man, the Christopher Reeve story. Superman, 2025, proved to be a strong box office performer, though its results were closely scrutinized given the film's role in launching the new DC universe and its substantial production and marketing costs. The film grossed $354.2 million in the United States and Canada and $261.5 million from international markets, for a worldwide total of $615.7 million, with a reported combined budget of approximately $400 million, including marketing. Industry analysts suggested that the film needed to surpass $500 million globally to break even, while a figure closer to $700 million would be considered a true success. Ultimately, industry outlets such as Variety projected the film would yield a theatrical profit of around $125 million, placing it in the profitable range but below the billion-dollar benchmark that had once been speculated. Leading up to its release, expectations for Superman were mixed but optimistic. Early projections ranged between $125 and $145 million for its domestic opening, higher than Man of Steel's $116 million debut, while Warner Bros. And DC Studios estimated a more conservative $90 to $125 million. Some outlets even speculated the film could reach $175 million, which would have eclipsed the debut of Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. By release week, projections settled at around $150 to $130 million. Preview screenings set the tone, as the film earned $2.8 million from Tuesday early access shows and $22.5 million total from Thursday previews, including prime screenings, setting a 2025 record at that point and marking the best-ever preview numbers for a James Gunn-directed film. The film earned $56.5 million on its first day, second only to a Minecraft movie that year, before finishing its opening weekend with $125 million. This gave Superman the biggest opening ever for a standalone Superman movie, surpassing Man of Steel, and the third-largest debut of 2025 behind a Minecraft movie and Disney's Lilo and Stitch. The film showed solid legs after opening weekend. In its second frame, it grossed $57 million, a 54% drop considered moderate for modern superhero films, especially compared to steeper decline seen with Captain America, Brave New World, 68%, and Thunderbolts, 56%. Analysts credited positive word of mouth for its sustained audience appeal. In its third weekend, it fell to second place with $24.9 million, overtaken by The Fantastic Four: First Steps, marking a 57% decline. By late July, Superman had crossed $300 million domestically, becoming the first DC film since The Batman, 2022, to reach that milestone, and by late August it crossed $600 million worldwide, also the first DC title to do so since The Batman. Internationally, the film earned $95 million in its opening weekend across overseas markets, bringing its worldwide launch total to $220 million. Its strongest territories were the United Kingdom, $9.8 million, Mexico, $8.8 million, China, $6.6 million, Brazil, $5.9 million, Australia, $5.3 million, France, $4.2 million, South Korea, $4.2 million, India, $3.8 million, Spain, $2.9 million, and Japan, $2.5 million. However, performance in China and several other markets was considered underwhelming, with analysts attributing this partly to Superman's strong association with American ideals, which limited his global appeal compared to more universally themed heroes. Despite this, the film held its ground as one of the top earners of the year, cementing itself as both a financial win for Warner Bros. And a solid foundation for the DCU's future. The critical response to Superman was largely positive, with a notable share of critics and audiences praising James Gunn's fresh take on the character, though some dissenting voices pointed to issues of overstuffing and tonal imbalance. On the review aggregator Rotten Tomatoes, the film holds an approval rating of 83% based on 490 reviews, with the site's consensus noting that the movie succeeds in crafting a dynamic new world while keeping Superman's emotional depth and moral compass at its core. Metacritic, which calculates scores using a weighted average, assigned the film a 68 out of 100 based on 58 reviews, suggesting generally favorable opinions overall. Audience feedback aligned with this critical reception. Cinema score polls gave the movie an A, matching the score of Man of Steel, 2013, while post-track surveys showed that 86% of viewers responded positively, with 74% saying they would strongly recommend the film to others. Many reviewers applauded the film's sense of fun, its bright and colorful visuals, and its earnest, heartfelt storytelling. Praise was particularly directed at the cast, with David Corenswet's Superman, Rachel Brosnahan's Lois Lane, and Nicholas Hoult's Lex Luthor singled out for their compelling performances. IGN awarded the film an 8/10, describing it as wonderfully entertaining and heartfelt, while Scott Phillips of Forbes celebrated its light-hearted tone and colorful imagery. Critics such as Trey Sauver of Awards Watch appreciated its refreshing avoidance of origin story repetition and crossover entanglements, allowing the film to stand firmly on its own. Jake Cole of Slant magazine emphasized Superman's enduring relevance, noting that the character works best when he transcends fleeting cultural trends. Cody Derricks of Next Best Picture compared Corenswet's casting to the legendary Christopher Reeve, calling it equally iconic for a new generation. NPR's Glenn Weldon echoed the sentiment, stating that the film captures a Superman deeply connected to his humanity, embodying the essence of the character more authentically than many recent interpretations. Other positive reviews highlighted the film's thematic focus on Superman's values and moral clarity. Liz Shannon Miller of Consequence praised it as a movie that resists the temptation of being a franchise-building vehicle, instead prioritizing the hero's timeless ideals. William Bibbiani of The Wrap argued that Gunn achieved his ambition of creating a Superman story that balanced awe-inspiring action with the sincere portrayal of hope and trust in humanity. Nicholas Barber of BBC Culture gave the film 3 out of 5 stars, commenting on its eccentric, almost B-movie sensibilities despite being a big-budget blockbuster. Alyssa Wilkinson of The New York Times described the film as goofy yet charming, comparing its approach to the groundbreaking Iron Man, 2008. Variety's Owen Gleiberman likewise gave it a positive assessment, citing the strong performances, while David Crow of Den of Geek argued that the film reached its most profound emotional heights when focusing on the intimate relationships between Clark Kent and Lois Lane. Nevertheless, the movie was not immune to criticism. Some reviewers felt that the film's expansive scope and large ensemble of characters weighed down its storytelling. Peter Bradshaw of The Guardian rated it 2 stars out of 5. Citing an unnecessary and cluttered backstory as well as yet another CGI-heavy, city-destroying finale. Sophie Butcher of Empire echoed these criticisms in her 2-star review, praising the film's vibrant visuals and inventiveness but lamenting its descent into a chaotic, effects-driven climax. She further criticized the uneven tone and the sidelining of core characters in favor of extraneous subplots and reveals. Eric Kane, writing for Forbes, also gave the film 2 stars, arguing that its overstuffed narrative and relentless pacing sacrificed meaningful character development for non-stop spectacle. Mark Kermode, while pointing out the tonal inconsistencies, nevertheless admitted that the film was unexpectedly good fun and entertaining in spite of its flaws. A particularly contentious aspect of the film was its depiction of a fictional war between the nations of Moravia and Jorhanpur, which some commentators interpreted as a reflection of real-world geopolitical tensions, particularly the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the Gaza war that began in 2023. This sparked debate over whether the film was making an intentional political statement. James Gunn, however, clarified that the script had been written long before these events and that the storyline was not conceived as an allegory. Overall, the critical response to Superman showcased a wide spectrum of opinions, but the prevailing view was that James Gunn had succeeded in revitalizing the Man of Steel for a modern audience. While not immune to narrative and tonal criticisms, the film's heartfelt performances, visual flair, and commitment to the core values of Superman earned it recognition as both a commercially successful and thematically resonant addition to the DC canon. When I would give up a kingdom for Krypto, the superpowered canine, a good boy who is also, by any objective standards of pet ownership, a very bad dog. Krypto is scruffy and white and tends to cock one ear adorably when listening to commands he will then ignore. His recall's actually not bad. They whistle and he'll come running, but he's destructive, high energy, easily distracted, and prone to greeting people by bouncing up and down on top of them, a habit that could kill someone who isn't also superpowered. Krypto could stand to go through a rigorous training program or two and definitely needs more stimulation and exercise. But given that his caretaker is busy learning how complex saving the world can be, a certain amount of neglect is inevitable. Writer-director James Gunn puts Krypto front and center in his delightful new take on Superman, which opens with the hero, David Corenswet, crashing down in the Antarctic after losing a fight for the first time, then getting battered some more by his trusty pooch before being dragged home for help. This pride of place is due in part to Gunn's being a dog lover. Krypto was inspired by and 3D modeled on his own rescue, Osu, and affection is suffused into every scene with the computer-generated animal. But Krypto's prominence is also a declaration of intent. It is incredibly goofy for Superman to have a dog who is, like him, outrageously strong and capable of flight, the kind of comic book lore that gets left out of big-screen adaptations for fear that normie audiences would rebel. The era of superhero movie dominance has been accompanied by lots of solemn talk about how these stories are a form of American mythology and very little about all the extremely silly shit that decades of comics have also proposed. Krypto, who was introduced in 1955, is one of the latter, and Gunn uses him to emphasize how fallible his take on the Man of Steel is going to be, as well as to signal how wonderfully dorky and earnest his movie is about to get. Gunn has basically been training for his current role as the co-head of DC Studios all his life. He started at legendary schlock house Drama, went on to direct subversive genre riffs like Slither and Super in between writing Scooby-Doo adaptations, then made the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, the best things the Marvel Cinematic Universe has birthed. He may love the source material, but he approaches it with a mixture of sincerity and irreverence that makes his new movie feel like a window being thrown open to a sunny day after years of oppressively dear DC action. He doesn't politicize Superman, exactly. He just returns the character to his roots as the creation of two Jewish American men whose families fled the pogroms and who gave their extraterrestrial defender of the planet a background as a refugee himself. Superman and his reporter alter ego, Clark Kent, played ably by Corenswet with assurance and frustrated Nigel de Macron that a copyright, is both an intensely American farm boy from Kansas and an alien survivor from a far-off civilization that has since been destroyed. An outsized version of the dual identities most immigrants balance. Superman finds the public turning against him after he intervenes to stop a war between two countries and wades into international relations. Gunn doesn't need to turn the saga into an allegory for it to feel timely. Similarly, it doesn't need to turn its take on Lex Luthor, played by a spectacularly compelling Nicholas Hoult, into some combination of Elon Musk, Trump, and someone actually smart for the comparison to come to mind. Those real-life figures have been accelerating into Luthor territory for years now. What Gunn's take on the supervillain highlights is how much the character turns his own envy and resentment into a presumed public good, as though the world would of course benefit from the relentless pursuit of his interests, even if that means engineering global conflicts and ripping the fabric of the universe apart. Luthor believes he's the most important person in the world, with the freedom to do whatever he wants, while Superman, who genuinely is singular, frets continually that he's not living up to what he sees as the mandate left to him by his Kryptonian parents, Bradley Cooper and Angela Sarafian, in a cameo. There's a lot about how we complicate and obfuscate what should be obvious good acts, such as saving the lives of children. But the film's approach isn't ham-fisted, and it makes room for gleefully fun stuff, too. As star reporter Lois Lane, Rachel Brosnahan is a nicely grown-up love interest who spars with Clark over his secret identities, actions and practically vibrates with excitement over chasing down stories. Edie Gathega is a deadpan scene stealer as Mr. Terrific, part of a corporate-sponsored trio of superheroes that includes a preening Nathan Fillion as Green Lantern, Guy Gardner and a Gloss 8 tilde copyright Isabel Merced as Hawkgirl. Skylar Jacinto was a standout as a ladies' man version of Jimmy Olsen, while Pruitt Taylor Vincent Navajo are folksy versions of Superman's adoptive parents, the Kents. The movie dives right into a reality in which Superman has been known to the public for years and dating Lois for months. Metahumans are already widespread enough that Luthor is lobbying the Pentagon to fund his own team, and Superman and Lois can have a heartfelt conversation in front of superpowered characters fighting a luminescent interdimensional sprite. Presuming our familiarity with superhero spectacle is a good call, we've had multiple iterations of this character in the past 2 decades alone. Instead of another origin story, it gives us sights we haven't yet seen, like Crypto bounding through the air after one of the many monkeys enlisted to rage tweet from a Luthor-created pocket dimension. What a good boy. 2. We all know the worst aspects of comic book movies. They can be overblown, convoluted, dunked and CGI bombast. A broken bar. Did I mention overblown? But here's the most ironic aspect of comic book movies. Most of them aren't actually very much like comic books. They tend to be rooted in their heroes' awesome prowess and the ability to zip through universes, smash objects into oblivion, and wield shields and lassos and hammers. But in the comic books that these movies still tape our nostalgia for, the superhero feats had to be showcased one grimy frame at a time, and that put a limit on how relentlessly physical the stories could be. The journeys of classic comic book superheroes were serial soap operas, more complex and interior than that of most comic book movie heroes. The comics were often dismissed as a vulgar form, but the bad joke of our superhero movie culture is that most of it is a vulgarization of the comics. That's where Superman, James Gunn's exuberant and popping reboot, makes a very smart play. Gunn, the bountiful blockbuster craftsman of the Guardians of the Galaxy films, wrote and directed Superman, which is the first cinematic missile launched by Warner Bros.' all-new DC universe, of which Gunn is also the co-executive overseer. Gunn knows that the world has grown wary of comic book film culture, and in the new Superman he's out to reset not just one studio's fortunes but the very idea of what a comic book movie is. In certain ways, the film fits snugly into familiar tropes. The opening credits revive the laser block lettering of the 1978 Superman, and the soundtrack incorporates John Williams' iconic theme music. The movie has pummeling battles, giant plushy troll monsters, characters hurtling through space, and a general air of ballistic wizardry. Superman, however, is also dedicated to treating the Man of Steel as what he was in the comics and the first 2 Christopher Reeve films, a majestic force of good, yet one who's stalwart but vulnerable, superhuman but touchingly humane, alive with internal struggle. The new movie isn't dark, Zack Snyder's ambitious mistake, so much as it's a loopy, spinning, multifaceted story with genuine emotional stakes. It truly feels like a comic book come to life, which is one reason it treats Superman's powers as the most spectacular and least interesting thing about him. Any actor taking on this role has to become a dashing hunk of clear-eyed, all-American jock-god nobility. But the key to a good Superman performance is what bubbles up from the actor's soul to lend that valor a playful, haunted undertow. Christopher Reeve, in the most perfect superhero performance of all time, had that quality in superabundance Henry Cavill did not. And David Corenswet, in Gunn's Superman, he has enough of it to lure us in. His urgent, slightly puppyish, wavy-haired Superman radiates a joy in what he's doing. But he's far from invincible. The film opens with his bruised and bloody body flung down in the Arctic near the Fortress of Solitude, where he has retreated after losing a fight for the first time. The exertions of Crypto, his loyal but reckless dog, only add insult to injury. We're cued to see that Superman is going to knock Superman around a bit. The roughing continues in the shabby apartment of Lois Lane. Rachel Brosnahan, the reporter for the Daily Planet who is dating her fellow newsman Clark Kent on the sly. She chides Clark for his cozy habit of interviewing Superman, and when Clark agrees to submit to an interview with Lois, she assaults him with tough questions about the ethics of being Superman. The way Corenswet and Brosnahan interlock egos makes for a riveting encounter, even if the line about Superman's goodness being punk rock is a bit cringe. Working in a jam-packed effusive way, Gunn doesn't rehash Superman's backstory, though there's a moving moment with his adoptive father, played by Pruitt Taylor Vince, and he enmeshes the character in more global complication than we're used to. Superman's nemesis, Lex Luthor, played with Quicksilver menace by Nicholas Hoult, is now a fascist tech billionaire, the CEO of Luthor Corp, who has his tentacles everywhere, in industry, the US government, and foreign nations. Early on, Superman tries to stave off the invasion of Jupiter by Moravia, an Eastern European country presided over by a bloviating frizzy-haired autocrat, Zlatko Buryakama, who's a tool of Luthor. Superman will go anywhere to save humans from injustice, but here it feels like he's in over his perfectly coiffed head. Though still the rock star of superheroes, Superman is now competing with other metahumans, notably the Justice Gang, whose members include Nathan Fillion's combative Green Lantern, Isabel Merst's razor-disc-tossing Hawkgirl, and Edie Gathagai's furious and merciless Mr. Terrific. There's also a conspiracy that catches fire on social media to make Superman look like a poser. A hologram of his late parents, Jor-El and Lara Loran, Bradley Cooper and Angela Sarafian, instructed him to help the people of Earth. But Luthor, after sneaking into the Fortress of Solitude, publicizes the other, glitchy half of the hologram as an exhortation to Superman to lord it over the human race. It turns out that that message is not a fake. This implants a fascinating and resonant conflict in the heart of our hero. What's his true mission, his driving identity? That's a quandary that Corenswet, face caught between a grin and a wince of pain, brings to life. For a good part of the movie, Superman is up against it, trapped in the pocket universe that Luthor has constructed as a sci-fi portal version of a penal colony, full of glass incarceration cubes. Superman is trapped there by metamorpho Anthony Carrigan, who sports a hand of kryptonite crystals. Throw in a quartet of R2-D2-like Superman automatons, a split down the middle of Metropolis, one of those geologic rifts that was more fun in the Lego Batman movie, and Jimmy Olsen's affair with Luthor's mutant Toad Kardashian-esque girlfriend, and you've got a movie frenetic enough to make Guardians of the Galaxy seem depressed. The super busy quality of Superman works for it and, at times, against it. The movie rarely slows down long enough to allow its characters to meditate on their shifting realities. That's one reason it falls short of the top tier of superhero cinema, The Dark Knight, Superman 2, The Batman, Guardians. I'd characterize the film as next-level good, a roster that includes Iron Man, Thor, Batman Begins, Captain America, and the hugely underrated Iron Man 3. Yet watching Superman, we register the layered quality of the conflicts, and we're drawn right inside them. Gunn constructs an intricate game of a superhero saga that's arresting and touching, and occasionally exhausting, in equal measure. Audiences should flock to it, though a question still hovers over the larger DC universe: even if you build it this well, will they come? 3. One of my favorite scenes in writer-director James Gunn's energetic but scattershot Superman is also one of the simplest. Rachel Brosnahan's Lois Lane comes home to her apartment and finds David Corenswet's Clark Kent cooking her breakfast for dinner as a surprise to celebrate their 3-month anniversary. Clark says that's her favorite. Lois says no, that's your favorite. They're in that awkward and halting but sweet startup period in a relationship, where one of them is ahead of the other in terms of making a commitment, and they're still getting to know each other. Oh, and then there's the fact that Clark is Superman, and Clark Kent, the Daily Planet journalist, keeps getting exclusive, puff-piece chats with Superman, but Clark agrees to give Lois an on-the-record interview with Superman. The result is a crisply written, well-acted exchange that plays like a modern screwball comedy with serious undertones, as Lois asks Superman fair but tough questions about the ethics of his decision to end the looming war in a foreign land without the approval of the United States government. Good stuff. There are a number of well-executed, dialogue-driven scenes sprinkled among the CGI mayhem and the existential wailing and the chuckle-inducing cameos, and Director Gunn admirably leans into the narrative of Superman as the embodiment of the classic American immigrant story. But this first entry in the new DC universe left me with the cinematic fast food vibe. You enjoy the flavors well enough, but you're left feeling as if you've consumed a familiar, empty-calorie, relatively happy meal. Despite the earnest and effective performances by Corenswet and Brosnahan, and a bounty of colorful turns by the talented supporting cast, the beastly elements of the Gods and Monsters universe come across as leftovers from Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy films, and the battle sequences feel like quick-cut, derivative replicas of fight scenes from dozens of other superhero movies. We're left with a mid-level take on Superman that, at times, will remind you of the 1978 version, but doesn't quite match it for pure pop entertainment value. To Director Gunn's credit, Superman doesn't waste time with the origin story we all know, opting to plunge us into a world where our titular superhero is recognized as the most powerful and beloved metahuman on Earth. However, his popularity is in jeopardy after the aforementioned mission, in which he took it upon himself to prevent a war. After losing a battle for the first time, Superman is saved by Krypto the Superdog, who isn't exactly Fortress of Solitude trained and could really use some superhero canine behavioral classes. You know that we're not supposed to take a Superman movie too seriously when the pup enters the equation. Nicholas Hoult gives a cracking good performance as a kind of GQ meets Elon Musk take on Lex Luthor, who oversees an army of technicians at Luthor Corp headquarters, making billions off his defense contracts while obsessing over destroying Superman, as his idiot influencer girlfriend Eve Tessmaker, a very funny Sarah Sampaio, takes selfies in the background. We spend only a few minutes here and there at the planet, with an underused Wendell Pierce as Perry White, while scholar Jaisato scores some laughs and puts a fresh spin on the young photojournalist Jimmy Olsen, as Luthor manipulates events in a way that has the public turning on Superman. Only Batman has seen the public turn against him more often than Superman through various movies over the decades. The already crowded field of supporting players expands to include Michael Holt, Mr. Terrific, Edie Gathaway, Guy Gardner, Green Lantern, Nathan Fillion, sporting that comic book accurate but polarizing bowl cut, and Kendra Saunders, Hawkgirl, Isabella Merst, among others. They're an entertaining trio with some impressive skill sets. Still, the ongoing debate about whether they're calling themselves the Justice Gang and the constant bantering and quipping are well-trod superhero movie territory. When Superman is detained and roughed up by masked agents who slam his face into the pavement before locking him up in a detention center alongside hundreds of other prisoners, including a separated family and a woman whose offense was writing a negative blog about Luthor, the modern-day, real-world parallels are striking and legitimate social commentary. On the lighter side, it's a kick to see a Superman who is so noble, so committed to doing the right thing, that he wonders if an enormous and destructive monster could have been subdued but not killed, perhaps to be released elsewhere. He actually takes the time to rescue a squirrel in the heat of a battle. Kudos to the filmmakers for casting Pruitt Taylor Vincent Neva Howell as Ma and Pa Kent, as opposed to the glam casting of Kevin Costner and Diane Lane in the roles in Man of Steel. The moments Clark shares with the only parents he's ever known are touching and authentic. As for Corenswet, he makes for a charming Superman, but he can't quite match the movie star power of Christopher Reeve, nor does he have the unsettling, laser-focused ferocity of Henry Cavill. We've had nearly a dozen versions of Superman on screens big and small through the decades, and for that matter, about the same number of Lex Luthors. This latest version makes for enjoyable enough popcorn entertainment, but ultimately leaves us wondering, was it even necessary? While bringing some Guardians of the Galaxy style wit and subversion to Superman was a fine idea, the final result is a mess, lacking in humor and basic thrills. Oh dear. What we have here is a Howard the Duck, a Hudson Hawk, a big-budget stinker which feels like the end of superhero films, when it should have been the beginning of something new. James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy movies for Marvel were a revelation, even within the context of Marvel's peak years. They had wit, effortless quirkiness and a daring devil-may-care attitude to the pretensions of the genre. and as such Gunn seemed to be a fine choice for Warner Brothers to be the co-executive overseer of the new DC universe. After the moody places The Last Superman arrived at, with Zack Snyder's grim Man of Steel and grimmer Batman vs Superman, Dawn of Justice, bringing in a bit of Guardian-style snarky subversion looked to be the perfect route out of ever-increasing darkness. But sadly, what we have here is very little Guardians magic, none of the verve or anarchy, only the silliness. Superman is slight, nonsensical, and only sporadically funny. See also, Nicholas Hoult's Fashion Over, how the Superman actor became the style hero of the summer without the rigor of the Marvel system. Gunn has fluffed this one. He's the writer as well as director, presumably with a level of control, so it's truly surprising how much of a mess it is, with lazy plotting, weak characterization and little in the way of spectacular action. The script's only achievement is to strip away any notion of Superman's formerly timeless appeal and make the character seem inconsequential. The story, such as it is, begins with Superman already 3 years into his appearance on Earth, branded a metahuman among some other beings. Confusingly, some of these are man-made, others are aliens, though we're not quite sure where the aliens came from. But anyway, there's people with powers knocking around, okay, and he's already a hero and loved by the good people of Earth. He's also in a relationship with Lois Lane, who knows all about the Clark Kent, Superman issue. So that's most of the interesting Superman stuff taken care of before it's even begun. See also, Superman's huge Rotten Tomatoes score doesn't match what critics are really saying. What's really going on? However, he's also in trouble. Unbeknownst to Superman, how? He has an enemy in Lex Luthor, a tech pro-billionaire driven by spite, a kind of Musk-Trump hybrid, who has a massive Luthor Corp tower in the center of Metropolis and is in control of a bunch of metahumans, led by the Hammer of Boravia, who at the start of the film have pummeled Sup half to death. We first see him bloodied and beaten in the snow near the Fortress of Solitude. Luthor wants Superman dead because he's envious of his good looks and popularity. Yes, really. Oh, and he's also pursuing a dastardly mission to stir up war in a faraway desert region, backing the militaristic power of Boravia against the smaller Jorhanpur, which Luthor wants to take as his own fiefdom. Remember how the Avengers films began to unpick the complexities of liberal interventionism versus U.S. imperialism. All such nuances stripped away here. Instead, we have evil foreign types with tanks in a bad country trying to destroy childlike foreign types with pickaxes in a good country. Before the film had started, Superman had already intervened to help Jorhanpur. While we see media and government types questioning his intervention, his response, which is portrayed as a good response, is that he just doesn't want people to die. He only wants to save. Any big questions are not the point. The point is that Superman is nice. Still, Luthor attempts to start a social media campaign against him. Ooh, you nasty man, with the help of some trained monkeys in a pocket universe he has created. Yep, but while Luthor is capable of such incredible feats, what he really wants is a little strip of land to rule on Earth and for people to like him more than Superman. Okay, the always excellent Nicholas Hoult can't do much with this poorly written Luthor, but at least Luthor is not as poorly written as Superman himself. David Corenswet reminds you of George Lazenby's casting as James Bond. He looks the part, but brings little else. Not that this is Corenswet's particular fault, he has very little to get his teeth into. Clark Kent is barely present, meaning there's no chance for Corenswet to explore an alter ego persona. You can't help but recall how brilliant Christopher Reeve was in making Clark a clumsy innocent, but he had scenes in which to explore that, and Superman is just a hell of a lot dimmer than we are used to. Merely a well-meaning jock type who doesn't want anyone to die, yet trite enough to also quite happily break off from a battle with a, never explained, floating jellyfish monster in the middle of the city, to have a cup of coffee and a light squabble with Lois. Corenswet has a nice smile, but his character is empty, a being who doesn't believe in much, certainly not truth, justice and the American way, and what that might mean now. He's just a dude who, like, doesn't want any other dudes to get hurt. He's the Joey from Friends of Superheroes, which could actually have worked as an approach if this were given full throttle. Super Bro, a stoner-ish college dropout who thinks he's punk rock and wants to scrap with aliens and kiss some chicks. Instead, this Superman is just so far behind the machinations of everyone else that he almost feels irrelevant. He's weak too. That opening, as we saw in the trailer, with Superman broken on a frozen tundra. It turns out this was caused by Luthor's metahuman simply slamming him really quite hard into the ground. Superman is not some invincible god, Jesus figure here. He gets beaten up a lot. What happened to his amazing feats? There's very little in the way of impressive moves, maybe not even Super Bro then. Just, bro. The spectacular stuff is left to Krypto, Superman's dog. The only reason why this has 2 stars not 1. While Bro is keen to protect humans, what he's really most concerned with is protecting his dog, even as Metropolis is being torn apart. Mind you, Krypto is the most fully formed character here. He really does embody the lovable, annoying characteristics of an actual dog. Animals that are always keen but very rarely conscious of what is required of them in most situations. Much like Superman himself in this movie, Krypto provides some comic moments but is also lazily used time and again to get Superman out of trouble when all else has failed. 4 or 5 times he appears at the last second with the get-out-of-jail-free card. While Rachel Brosnahan was seemingly perfectly cast as Lois, the Mrs. Maisel star already brings some pizzazz to Smart Cookie reported Lois, with the chops required for some screwball comedy repartee with Clark. She isn't given much of a chance to do this. Rather, she's in girlfriend mode to Superman. Clark, frustratingly little is made of this dichotomy in terms of their relationship, and while she does interview Superman to raise concerns about his foreign land interventions, it's framed as a relationship pro as much as a journalist challenging his values. While Lois is admittedly the only female human character who isn't a boobs-out, dim-witted solipsistic phone-addicted girl child, the title cards aren't the only retro thing here. She is also far from the strong foil who is capable of saving the day on earthly terms. Oddly, she is never even put into peril. She's just a commentator on the sidelines, and a mild one at that, not a cynic or a wit. Other characters include the Hateful Justice Gang, unknowingly Rubbish Justice League, who are portrayed as a bunch of layabout preeners with corporate sponsorship. This may have seemed funny on paper, but they are too annoying to really zing, and while their leader, Green Lantern Guy Gardner has some nice lines, ultimately he just comes across as a moron with the worst hair in movie history. Mr. Terrific, Edie Gathagay, is more bearable but Hawkgirl, Isabella Merst, is given nothing to do. It's hard to care about these people. Wendell Pierce, Bunk from The Wire, again barely features as Daily Planet editor Perry White. He just hangs around in a few scenes. The film plays out with these light characters fighting through endless sequences that lack any kind of internal cohesion. At one stage a black hole appears on Earth to conveniently suck away a main bad guy, but then is never sealed up or mentioned again. A tiny dinosaur alien creature, presumably Luthor is nicking them from his pocket universe but who knows, is unleashed on the city and grows within minutes to Godzilla proportions. But no one gets hurt because they trap him in a pedestrianized zone. Superman's lungs are filled with nanobots to suffocate him but he manages fly into space with 2 bad guys hanging off him and survives, yet earlier on his robot mates, not as funny as you'd think, in the Fortress of Solitude had to repair life-threatening lung damage after that first battle. Is he invincible or not? And without laboring the point, all the while Luthor is this mega genius who wants to be loved like Superman more than he wants to rule the universe as he is clearly capable. The stakes are kept low here, and the film tries to get through on filling the screen with stuff in the hope it works out. It doesn't. Where does Superman go from here? And the wider new DC universe? This isn't a fresh start, more of a face plant into a new era. Could Krypto take over to turn the whole thing into Superdog's universe? That may be the only route. Look, superhero films over the last 15 years or so, particularly the Marvel films, have succeeded by delving into issues of identity, socio-political concerns, military morality, and philosophical questions about life. Just like the comics did, on the big screen this level of intelligence brought about intense fascination and discussion by huge swathes of audiences, and they managed it while at the same time delivering good laughs and huge spectacle. Of course, in recent times, these films have drifted into pretension and became so intricate and convoluted that audience began to lose interest. But Gunn has thrown out the baby with the bathwater. The pretension has gone, but so has any challenge. So why should we care? This Superman is pure bubblegum, but doesn't even really succeed on those terms either. It's simply not funny or hyperactive enough. The only thing you take away from the film is a bewildered shrug. What does it matter? The film says, it's all a goof off, dude. 5. Look, up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's Superman, James Gunn's delightfully goofy crowd pleaser that feels like a feature-length comic book splash page. Unapologetically silly, disarmingly earnest, and intentionally corny, Gunn's movie is entertaining, fast-paced, and, most important of all, fun. Remember fun? The last 2 decades or so of superhero cinema have been bogged down in a type of gritty realism that can be traced back to Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. Nolan's films took what was then a unique approach to superhero stories and asked, what if a costumed crime fighter like Batman existed in the real world? Nolan's concept worked so well that it heavily influenced seemingly every superhero movie that came in its wake. And hey, there's nothing wrong with dark and gritty stuff. I like dark and gritty stuff. I was a big fan of Matt Reeves' recent thriller-influenced The Batman reboot, but sometimes, whenever I'm watching a modern comic book movie that takes itself too seriously, I start to get a little antsy. Would it kill them to lighten up a little? Is the prevailing thought. Lighten up is exactly what Gunn is doing with his Superman, a movie that adopts a wonderfully absurd comic book logic where seemingly everything and anything is possible. Reality be damned. The Nolan Batman movies went to great pains to over-explain seemingly every element of Batman's lore and ground it in a sense of realism. Gunn's Superman, in sharp contrast, realizes that since we're dealing with a world full of superpowered beings donning capes, the sky's the limit. Absolutely nothing that happens in this movie would likely happen in the real world and I'm 100% on board with that, because the movie sells it. At one point, some bad guys unleash a cute, tiny monster that suddenly grows into a Kaiju-sized threat. There's no explanation for how this happens, and I didn't need one. I was happy enough to watch Superman fight the big monster. Superman has some script problems, but it's so fun to watch. You might not care. Much has been said about how Gunn's Superman is meant to be the start of a whole new universe of DC movies, and how Gunn is starting fresh and trying to revive the Superman brand after Zack Snyder's grim take on the character didn't quite go over so well. Here's the thing. I don't care about any of that. When I sit down to watch a movie, the last thing I'm worried about is how it might set up a sequel, or a prequel, or a spin-off. I am interested in the movie I'm currently watching, and nothing more. So I'm not going to spend much time here talking about Easter eggs or how Gunn's movie is a stepping stone for what comes next, because none of that matters to me. What matters is whether or not I enjoyed the film at hand, and I did. Immensely. That's not to say Gunn's script doesn't suffer from some problems. There's an overabundance of on-the-nose dialogue where characters awkwardly proclaim their intentions and motivations, and a lot of these moments sink like a lead balloon. Also, while the tone Gunn is going for here is deliberately funny, at times this feels like a full-blown comedy. Some of the stabs at humor are dull, I'm looking at you, gaggle of nerdy comic relief henchmen. But despite these issues, Superman soars, thanks to a game cast and a gee-whiz, aw shucks mentality that becomes irresistibly charming. The film also hits the ground running and never lets up. Superman is thankfully not another origin story, and reveals right from the jump that in the world of this film, superheroes, or metahumans as they're called, have existed for a long time. But in the last 3 or so years, a new hero has emerged, a Superman, seemingly the most powerful metahuman ever. The world at large knows that Superman is an alien from the destroyed planet Krypton, and for the most part, Public reaction to this big blue boist is positive, but how long will that last? David Corenswet, Rachel Brosnahan, and Nicholas Hoult are all great in their respective roles as played by David Corenswet, Superman, who disguises himself as nerdy Daily Planet reporter Clark Kent, is a likable, affable sort of fellow. Corenswet has oodles of charisma here, and it's easy to buy him as a superhero. Gunn also makes the wise choice to show us that this Superman is not unbeatable. Yes, he's super strong and can do all sorts of amazing stuff, but Superman also gets his ass kicked on multiple occasions in this film. In fact, our first look at him shows him bloody and bruised and calling for help from Krypto, an adorable super dog who wears a cape and is fond of causing mayhem, a CGI creation. Krypto is a real highlight here, mostly because the film wisely lets him act like a real dog, who just happens to have superpowers. Superman's secret identity isn't so secret. Some people know who he really is, including his girlfriend, co-worker, intrepid sugar-loving reporter Lois Lane, played with the perfect amount of spark by Rachel Brosnahan. Corenswet and Brosnahan have crackling chemistry together, and a scene where Lois interviews Superman is one of the film's most memorable moments thanks to how the actors bounce off each other. During that interview, Lois points out that not everyone loves Superman. For one thing, the Man of Steel recently interfered in an international geopolitical incident and got involved with a looming war between two fictional nations. In Superman's mind, he was justified in his actions, but as Lois not unfairly points out, no one appointed or elected Superman the guardian of the whole world. He simply took up that mantle on his own. And that doesn't sit well with some people. It really doesn't sit well with Lex Luthor, a billionaire who is admittedly obsessed with Superman. Lex has spent a fortune trying to find a way to defeat Supes, simply because he hates the idea that this handsome, charming alien showed up one day and won over the masses. He's a full-blown hater, a smarmy, sniveling worm who is willing to sacrifice innocent lives if it means stopping Superman. Nicholas Hoult plays Lex, and Hoult is shockingly good at playing such a slimeball. We love to hate this guy, and we can't wait to see him get his comeuppance. Eddie Gathagai's Mr. Terrific is indeed terrific. Gunn's script races through all these details faster than a speeding bullet, to the point where I'm guessing some viewers might be bothered over how little setup there is. But I found this approach rather refreshing. Gunn seems to realize that everyone knows the basic details about Superman and his backstory, and that to regurgitate a bunch of exposition all over again would be wasting precious time that could be spent showing us cool, colorful action set pieces loaded with humor. Superman surrounds Supes with a bunch of colorful, funny supporting players. In addition to Lois and Lex, there's Skylar Gisanto's Jimmy Olsen, who is amusingly the object of desire of seemingly every woman in the city of Metropolis. Then there's the Justice Gang, a trio of superheroes with corporate sponsorship who sometimes assist Superman and have a mostly friendly relationship with the last son of Krypton. The Justice Gang group features a very amusing Nathan Fillion as egotistical Guy Gardner aka Green Lantern, Isabella Merced as Hawkgirl, who isn't above getting her hands dirty and literally squawks at villains as she flies towards them, and the super smart tech genius Mr. Terrific, played by Eddie Gathagai. Of the three, it's Mr. Terrific who gets the most screen time, and Gathagai is a scene stealer who makes his character pop. I wanted even more of him. His no-nonsense approach to all the shenanigans going on in the film is a real hoot. Superman isn't afraid to get silly, and that's the movie's superpower. Superman never seems to slow down, rushing through its story with super speed. Superman is beloved, and then, thanks to the machinations of Luthor, he's suddenly hated, but we know it's only a matter of time before he wins the people back on his side, and no one is going to accuse Gunn's script of being original or even that clever. But it doesn't have to be, because there's such a light, funny, sweet nature at play here that I found almost impossible to resist. If there's an overarching message to Gunn's film, it's that kindness is the new punk rock, and while I'm sure countless people will roll their eyes at such a cornball notion, I bought into it at least while watching the movie. This Superman is flawed in many ways, but he's constantly striving to do the right thing for others, And that's a trait more people should aspire to in a world where everyone seems to be suffering from main character syndrome. We've been inundated with the barrage of superhero movies for decades now, and they're all starting to blend together. They follow a standard formula mostly because studio execs think that's what people want, and they have the box office receipts to back that up. Gunn's Superman isn't even close to treading new ground, but it feels fresh and invigorating because the filmmaker has decided to reject the snarky, detached irony that's built into so many other superhero movies and embrace things that some folks might consider cringe. Yes, Superman is a frequently corny movie because Superman is a corny character, a Kansas farm boy alien who saves squirrels in danger and listens to lame pop music. There's nothing grim or dark here, just a real sense of entertaining silliness that left a big, stupid smile on my face. In our current media landscape, such an approach feels surprisingly bold. Film rating, 8 out of 10. 6 from his breakout as writer-director, Slither, to Guardians of the Galaxy. James Gunn has made it his mission to lighten the oppressive darkness of so much contemporary sci-fi with irreverent humor and the exhilaration of an unabashed genre geek. For his first entry as new co-Ray alongside producer Peter Safran of DC Studios, Gunn brings his signature approach to Superman. The result is very much a comic book action-adventure, but one with a warm human heart. It reveals an obvious love for Richard Donner's 1978 event movie headlined by Christopher Reeve, and for 1981's arguably even better Superman 2, without sliding into reverential self-seriousness. That was one of the weaknesses of Bryan Singer's joyless and swiftly forgotten 2006 effort, Superman Returns, while by contrast, distancing itself so strenuously from the Donner model was the fatal flaw of Zack Snyder's turgid Man of Steel in 2013, though that doom and gloom saga has its champions, factoring in the superhero smackdowns and team-ups that have cluttered DC's output in the 2000s. The new millennium has not been kind to Kal-El, the refugee alien from Krypton created by writer Jerry Siegel and artist Joel Shuster in 1938. Superman. Release date, Wednesday, July 11th. Cast, David Corenswet, Rachel Brosnahan, Nicholas Hoult, Edie Gathagay, Anthony Carrigan, Nathan Fillion, Isabella Merced, Skylar Giacinto, Sarah Sampaio, Mara Gabriella Nafara, Wendell Pierce, Alan Tudyk, Pruitt Taylor Vince, Neva Howell, Beck Bennett, Michaela Hoover. Director-screenwriter, James Gunn, based on characters from DC. Rated PG-13, 2 hours 9 minutes. Gunn's screenplay can certainly be faulted for piling on too many elements, making it at times seem lumpy and overstuffed. But what matters most is that the movie is fun, pacey and enjoyable, a breath of fresh air sweetened by a deep affection for the material and boosted by a winning trio of leads. David Corenswet makes an outstanding Superman, Clark Kent, his performance loaded with self-irony, charm and poignant vulnerability as he wrestles with doubts as to whether his mission to do good and protect humankind was based on a lie. Corenswet's funny, scrappy rapport with Rachel Brosnahan's whip-smart Lois Lane, possibly the sharpest and most captivating interpretation of the Ace Daily Planet reporter since Margot Kidder makes their every scene together a delight. Nicholas Hoult dials down the cartoonish villainy of many previous Lex Luthors, leaning into the evil genius aspect of the character in ways that heighten the stakes. But although he's the smartest guy in just about any room, Hoult's Lex is also petulant and insecure, driven by jealousy over the world's adoration for Superman as much as by the need to eliminate anything in the way of his nefarious schemes. The movie opens with a quick primer on the centuries-old history of metahumans on Earth, leading to Superman's first defeat at the hands of one of them. He's introduced collapsed and bleeding in the snow, summoning just enough strength to whistle for his trusty dog Krypto, who thunders across the white tundra churning up powder before jumping all over Superman as if it's playtime, not a call for help. Krypto, who also sports a red cape but behaves like an undisciplined puppy school reject, borders on cutesy. But Gunn is the guy who made a genetically engineered talking raccoon and a sentient humanoid tree beloved members of the gang in Guardians of the Galaxy, so Superdog is well within his reach in a movie that, mercifully, goes much lighter on that franchise's bro-ish humor. When Krypto finally gets the message and drags the wounded Superman back to his crystalline refuge, the Fortress of Solitude, a team of robot helpers gets to work on repairs. They heal him physically with a blast of sunlight and soothe him emotionally by replaying the partially lost farewell hologram message from his parents, his last remaining link to his since-destroyed home planet. Identified only by numbers, the custodial droids are a nice touch. The chattiest of them, number 4, Alan Tudyk, gets laughs by continually speculating on the human emotions they would be feeling if they could feel. Back in Metropolis, Superman again gets hammered by the Hammer of Aravia, a hulking, heavily armored mystery figure who appears to have similar powers to Superman and then some. The character's identity shouldn't be too hard to guess for longtime comics aficionados. The Hammer rips up much of downtown, causing millions in damages, but shifts the blame by saying the mayhem was a response to Superman's attack on his country's armed forces. But Superman claims his actions were to prevent a war in which people were going to die, following Aravia's attempt to invade the poor neighboring country of Jorhanpur. The shady Aravian president, Zlatko Buryakama, insists that the Hammer is a vigilante with no ties to his government. Unsurprisingly, this chaos is being orchestrated by Lex, high up in his glass tower at Luthor Corp, with a Bluetooth headset and a team of black uniformed techies at keyboards carrying out his commands. He has every conceivable fight move pre-programmed, enabling him to shout numbers at his crew like a football coach calling game plays from the sidelines. Lex is a tech billionaire very much in the Musk, Zuckerberg mode, but Hoult gives him sufficient ambiguity to blur the lines of his villainy between someone genuinely concerned about humankind enthralled to an alien and someone who just wants absolute power at any price. Gunn takes the vast canon of Superman lore from various iterations of the comics to TV shows like Smallville to the Donner films and treats it like a grab bag, plucking elements from many sources. That includes Lex's most valued ally, Angela Spica, Mara Gabriella Nefara, aka the Engineer, a dark-eyed beauty whose nanite-enriched blood allows her to morph body parts with inky black fluidity into whatever form is required, be it buzzsaw hands or tentacle-like cables that can hack into any computer circuit. That skill proves useful with the Fortress of Solitude's digital hub, allowing Lex to release an unscrambled copy of the message from Superman's parents, seeding doubts as to his intended mission on Earth. It's plot points like this that show how superhero sci-fi might intersect with real-world concerns, how the idea that manipulated information can be circulated to turn a revered public figure into a pariah no longer seems like fantasy. Only slightly less relatable is Lex's fleet of trained monkeys at computer monitors, flooding social media with falsehoods and conspiracy theories and coming up with damning anti-Superman hashtags that stick. There's a lot going on in Gunn's script, including a Luthor-constructed pocket-verse that houses his own cavernous high-tech prison Rex Mason, or Metamorpho, played by the wonderful Anthony Kerrigan from Barry, a humanoid exploited by Lex for his shifting chemical makeup, which allows him to transform body parts even into kryptonite in the metahuman Justice League. That trio of corporate-backed law enforcers includes tech wizard and man of many cool gadgets Mr. Terrific, Edie Gathagay, airborne warrior Hawkgirl, Isabel Merst, and their self-appointed, self-inflated Captain Guy Gardner, better known as Green Lantern, a droll Nathan Fillion, who has hands down the worst bowl cut and dye job in Metropolis. Paradoxically, the human heart that grounds the story is the alien from Krypton. Corenswet brings such warmth to the role that he anchors the film every time it threatens to veer off into overly busy fantasy. Lex's sabotage proves so effective that it sparks an existential crisis in Superman, who at his lowest point retreats to the farm of his adoptive parents, Neva Howell and Pruitt Taylor Vince. It's one of the movie's loveliest and most affecting interludes. Corenswet is equally strong as Clark, tempering the usual nerdy awkwardness and giving him more confidence in his role at the Daily Planet, without making him too slick. The chief contributing factor behind his more self-possessed Clark is that Gunn removes the mystery of his dual identity for Lois, departing from the usual story by dropping them 3 months into a relationship. It does, however, remain a secret in the newsroom. from cigar-chomping editor Perry White, Wendell Pierce, underused, but always good to see him, Steve Lombard, Beck Bennett, and Jimmy Olsen, Skylar Giacinto. Lois plays along at work, upping the undercurrent of romantic frisson in her flirtatious, teasing banter with Clark, but their one-on-one time in Lois' apartment is the movie's stealth weapon. In one amusing moment, Lois shrugs off his concerns about exposure, suggesting that people are bound to figure it out sooner or later, prompting Clark to respond, but the glasses, Brosnahan and Corenswet are especially disarming in a scene in which Clark agrees to sit down and be interviewed by Lois, after she complains about him always getting the Superman exclusives. The subtle idea that the Man of Steel is somewhat controlling about his media profile is quite funny. Gunn also makes an appealing choice by having the Daily Planet team pile into Mr. Terrific's T-craft flight vessel to help rescue Superman and stop an impending disaster. Jimmy, boyish and cocky as ever, proves a real asset thanks to his clandestine connection with Lex's fashionista, selfie-snapping girlfriend Eve, Sarah Sampaio. She's never identified as the Miss Tessmaker played so divinely by Valerie Perrine in the Donner films, though she's one and the same, and maybe not as shallow and ditzy as she seems. A brief but tantalizing appearance of another canonical Superman universe character near the end whets the appetite for an installment coming next year. Pumped up by DP Henry Brahm's dynamic camera work, Beth Mickles' imaginative production design, the effects team's top-notch CG work and a galvanizing orchestral and synth score by John Murphy and David Fleming that weaves in the immortal John Williams theme, Gunn's Superman is overloaded, even muddled at times, but relentlessly entertaining. Perhaps its biggest strength is that it sidesteps all the revisionist murk of superheroes on screen in the last decade or two and reverts almost to an enchanting state of childlike wonder. 7 Fine, I'll say it. I need Superman. I'm craving a hero who stands for truth and justice, whether he's rescuing cats or reporting the news. Cheering for such idealism used to feel corny. All the cool, Caped Crusaders had ethical kinks. Even his recent movies have seemed a little embarrassed by the guy, scuffing him up with cynicism. I'm with the latest incarnation of Superman, David Corenswet, when he tells Lois Lane, Rachel Brosnahan, that having a big heart is the real punk rock. Director James Gunn's antsy reboot skips past the origin story of infant Kal-El slamming into Kansas in an escape pod from Krypton. Instead, this Superman opens with Corenswet's savior slamming into Earth again, this time after losing his first fight. Lex Luthor, Nicholas Hoult, and his bionic minions have batted Superman around Metropolis like a toy, forcing him to flee to his fortress of solitude in Antarctica with 14 broken bones and a busted bladder. The starkness of the white snow against his bright costume looks like a blank page asking, who should Superman be today? The Superman myth has always been a fable of collision, a near-perfect alien challenge to protect fragile, scared humans who struggle to accept that we're not the bestest beings in the universe. Here, Kal-El's parents, Bradley Cooper and Angela Sarafian, are heard insulting Earthlings outright. Other people there are simple and profoundly confused, which, for the franchise, is actually going a little easy on humankind. Historically, we tend to let him down. Going back to his surprisingly spiky movie debut in 1951's Superman and the Mole Men, note the lack of a versus, in which George Reeves protected the outsiders of the title from a rural American mob. Obviously, none of you can be trusted with guns, so I'm going to take them away from you, he lectures the townsfolk, pretzeling their shotguns. Stop acting like Nazi stormtroopers. Gunn isn't that punk rock. He's pop punk. He wants to be liked by a mass audience. Having taken control of the DC universe, he's pivoted away from gloom to concoct a Superman who isn't too sweet or too serious. Frankly, he's a little stupid. After a hasty resuscitation from his adorable dog Krypton and his robot butlers, voiced by Alan Tudyk, Paul Clementi and Michael Rooker, among others, Superman races back into battle before he's healed. He gets beaten senseless again. Stupid is a smart idea for a 21st century reboot. Superman's stymied do-gooder impulse feels right for an era where you can't say save the whales without some genius asking why you don't care about plankton. The goal might have been to make him super naive, but Gunn doesn't do sincerity. so the Superman comes off as obtuse and overwhelmed, which, even for a Juilliard-trained actor like Corenswet, is pretty impossible to pull off with any personality. His dimples and blue eyes are empathetic, but he mostly just looks dazed. This Superman is all impulsive energy, much like his unhousebroken puppy, who also wears a cape and tramples on things when he tries to help. They're essentially the same species. Superman gets distracted mid-fight by his urgent need to protect the squirrel. Krypto spends one brouhaha looting a pet store. Superman's reporter girlfriend of 3 months, Lois, a savvy and sensible Brosnahan, kitted in fabulous A70s-style threads, is well aware of his dual identity and the flaws in his hasty reactions to injustice. She points out that physically threatening the thuggish president of fictional Boravia, Zlatko Buric, to stop invading weaker countries is technically torture. People were going to die. Superman sputters. Lois' reticence about him mirrors our own vacillation with the DC Universe's new direction. We need to see something more from this guy before we commit. In this script, the lines of good and evil aren't drawn in black and white or even gray, they're a tangle of squiggles. There are no neat solutions, no shortcuts, and there's no way for Superman to defend himself when Lex Luthor drums up a dubious sex scandal to accuse the Kryptonian of grooming humanity and hires an actual room of typing monkeys to ruin his online reputation. You may remember that before Gunn was hired to oversee DC Studios, Walt Disney fired him from Marvel when a blogger behind Pizzagate unearthed the director's old shock jock jokes about pedophilia and 9/11. Clearly, that grievance is still on his mind. The plot is impatient but entertaining enough. The villainous billionaire Luthor, who Hoult plays like a beady techno-zealot, has several schemes up his fancy sleeve. One involves a tent city in the desert that hides a portal to an extrajudicial jail for his enemies, both interstellar and domestic. He's got green-skinned babies and a sobbing ex-girlfriend in there. Gunn has sarcastically tried to make the place look cheery. Luthor's henchmen are dressed in mismatched Hawaiian shirts, but the sequence might give you the shivers. Gunn is known for wrangling groups of weirdos, Guardians of the Galaxy, the Suicide Squad, into blockbuster action comedies. His instincts are to spray everything with silly string and slap on a wacky soundtrack. Here, there's actually a very good doom metal electronic score by John Murphy and David Fleming, but the movie stiffens up whenever it needs to get real. When we visit Clark Kent's family farm, it's touching to see his childhood bedroom, but his plain-spoken ma and pa, Neva Howell and Pruitt Taylor Vince, have been made to talk so slowly they sound like they have brain injuries. It's as though Superman isn't sure how to be earnest without whacking us over the head with it. The script is way more confident when Gunn gets to scribble in the margins, whisking in Millie Alcock's party hardy Supergirl for a fast and fun cameo. She'll have her own movie next summer. Luthor's main henchwoman, known only as the Engineer, Mara Gabriella Navarro, is constructed from skittering robotic cells that let her change form like a Swiss Army knife, while his latest ditzy blonde girlfriend, Eve, a very funny Sarah Sampaio, wriggles her way into becoming a memorable highlight. One of the film's umpteenth kaiju fights introduces the corporate-sponsored Justice Gang, a trio of apathetic superheroes spearheaded by Green Lantern, Nathan Fillion, with Hawkgirl, Isabella Merced, and Mr. Terrific, Edie Gathagay. They dispatch a monster so gracelessly that Superman finally gets some sense knocked into him. There's got to be a better way to do this, he groans. The movie's tone shapeshifts just as recklessly as an outer space inmate named Metamorpho, Anthony Carrigan, who can transform into explosive acid. Gunn is compelled to show us his entire vision for the DC Universe, but as he cuts from a slow-burning gag about a garage door opener to a legitimately brutal execution to a whiz-bang combat scene set to a song that whoops, fun fun fun, I just wished I was having more of it. This isn't quite the heart-soaring Superman I wanted, but these adventures wise him up enough that I'm curious to explore where the saga takes him next. Still, I left chewing over how comic book movies can be so popular and prescient, and yet people who've grown up rooting against characters like Lex Luthor cheer them on in the real world. Maybe Gunn can answer that in a sequel, or maybe our stubborn myopia is what this Superman means when he says, I screw up all the time, but that is being human.